I am.
All right.
Okay.
Well, welcome everyone to the Data Science Learning Community Project Club. And today, is it Jannik? I've
Yes,
never
it's Yannick.
actually said your name out loud. So
That's
Jannik
correct, yeah.
will be speaking to us. And take it away, Jannik.
All right. This is not like a pre-made talk for like a very high stakes situation. So it's just a like informal get together type of thing. So feel free to ask questions at any time or interrupt me when something's unclear. And I want to sort of keep this a bit interactive, more like a workshop type of thing. Let me open up my notes. And just to have something to show and walk you through. Now, the idea of this whole thing is to talk about NeoVim, because of course, like how do you recognize a NeoVim user? Don't worry, they will tell you. NeoVim and Vim users also tend to be very passionate about their editors, and maybe we can find out together why that is. So I do wonder, have either of you used Vim motions before? And have you maybe even used Vim or NeoVim before?
I used to use Vim way back when. I was going to say when it was the only choice, but it wasn't the only choice. It's just, it was, at the time I would have definitely said it's the best choice. That's why I used it.
And are you
um,
still using the motions in, for example, RStudio or VS Code?
I'm not sure what you mean by motions.
Like the movement commands, for example.
Oh, some of them. Some uh we'll see.
Okay,
But
because
not so much. Like it's been a long time since I've really used Vim, and therefore I don't think in it anymore.
exciting. Okay, and Zach, what about you? If you want to share, you don't have to, but you can.
Um, I haven't worked with this, no. I'm still
Okay,
very new to Quarto in general.
okay. So like Vim is not directly linked to Quarto, but I will show you how we basically brought Quarto to Vim or NeoVim. That's okay. This right here. Okay. So I guess in order to show why we would want Quarto also not just in VS Code or like RStudio, is I need to convince you a bit why NeoVim is a good thing and why you might want that. And even if you don't take away that, okay, I need to start using NeoVim right now, which maybe you don't even want to have or have to, I still want to convince you that Vim motions are a really cool thing. So because you can also use them in other editors. I can go into RStudio and enable Vim input right now, or I can go into VS Code and enable Vim input. So I don't need to learn the new VS Code keyboard shortcuts. I can use my old ones from Vim, and I can take them wherever I want to. I can even use them in my browser, which I can show you later. So I don't often need to take my hands off the keyboard and use the mouse, for example. I can do everything just resting comfortably on the home row on my keyboard. Which I guess is why a lot of Vim users also have fancy keyboards, but it's quite a bit of overlap. Now the main idea we will run into is when you first open Vim, and let me also just open nvim without having anything configured. So this is how opening a file would look like if we just ignore my configuration. Just to show you that the things I'm showing you now, you get out of the box. You don't need to do any configuration or something for it. Now, actually, that was a stupid idea because in this other thing, I had this plugin that shows the keys I'm pressing. So up here on the top right corner, you see the keys I'm pressing. So let me stick with my configuration. But the things you can do in here, you can just also do in, for example, enabling Vim mode in VS Code or RStudio. Now, the idea is when we first enter Vim, NeoVim, we are in what is called normal mode. And that means if I press a key, I will not just enter a letter into my document. It will do something. It will like execute a command. For example, J and K move my cursor up and down. And I made my screen fairly big, my terminal, so you can see what's happening. If it's too small, I can even make it bigger if you want, but it should be all right. So this is one thing. If we actually want to insert text, we press I to go into insert mode. And now I can type. And I can press escape again to go back out of insert mode. This is why a lot of people that use Vim, NeoVim motions have configured, for example, it's a caps lock. The caps lock key to be escape instead, because no one really needs caps lock unless you, I don't know, write a lot of Fortran code or are a very shouty person in general. So we go into insert mode, we can enter some code. But this alone is not very exciting. Now, moving up and down with J and K is fine. We can also move by different motions. For example, I can move by word by pressing W. And this allows me to navigate my text a bit faster. And then we get to combining these motions with commands. For example, there is something like a change. And change means you delete something and you go into insert mode. And then you can enter text. For example, we can talk to our editor by running what I have written down here. And that is just typing CIW, which means change inside word. And now the word got deleted and I can replace it with something. Also with hello, for example. And all these commands are repeatable, which means if I want to execute the same thing I just did, I press dot, which just does the same thing I did earlier. Now let's undo all these changes using U or R to redo if I went too far. Another helpful thing is the visual mode. I press V and now I can visually select things and do stuff with it. For example, I press D to delete it, or I go into visual line mode, which is capital V. Also, these operators you can combine with a count. So for example, if I want to jump by 2 words, instead of pressing W twice, I can also press 2W. Or if I want to delete until the second next word, I can press D, 2W. Now at first this is a bit clunky, but as you get to it, you start thinking and being able to talk with your editor. So for example, I have a misspelled word here, and I know that all these jump to the next something commands are on the square brackets. So I can press square bracket S to go to the next spelling mistake. But before that, I need to enable spell check. Now it's also highlighted, you see. And now if I'm up here and I'm going through my document, I want to check all the mistakes I made. I just press this key combination you can see on the top right. And now I can, for example, ask for corrections using the L. Or I can say this is actually a fine word and I mark it as being a good word. Let's disable spell checking again. More example of combining these are, for example, yanking stuff, which is copying. If I press YY, it means I copy the whole line. I can paste it with P. But I can also YIW, yank inside a word, or yank inside these braces. No, it's not braces, it's parentheses. So, for example, YI parentheses, and I copied the word copy now. So all this gets you moving around your text and your code really quickly, and it allows you to do very, very quick edits. Another example, let's go into this example text about otters I have here. Let's say we want to jump to the next sentence. We just press F to jump forward to the next dot. And then you can repeat it using semicolons. But sentences are also a sort of word object in Vim. So if I say DAS, it means delete a round sentence. We have now deleted this sentence and can move it somewhere else using P. Or let's say I want to take all these sentences and make them all on their own lines. Instead of doing this manually, I can go VIP, which means visually select inside paragraph. And then I go into command mode. Command mode is whenever you see this little semicolon on the bottom left, I can start typing here. For example, I can go open the help pages, or I can ask for the help for something specific, like insert mode, for example. Or I can run a command on the current selection. So this arcane instruction here means run this command on the current selection, but it automatically appears when I enter command mode with typing, what's it called, colon, from a visual selection. Now let's say I want to replace all the dots. I go into search and replace mode using S. Now I want to search for something. I search for a little dot followed by a space, and I want to replace it with a line break. So I press Control V to verbatim insert something, and then I want to do this globally on each line, so all the lines get affected. Now, if I wanted to repeat this, I go VIP, colon, and then Control P for the previous command. And now this is how we quickly modified a bunch of text. But how can we work with code? Now, out of the box, Vim gives you text editing capabilities, and these are very, very powerful. But of course, in order to be really productive, you also want something like a language server that you can talk to and that gives you information about your code. Now, if I just edit an R file, well, I can put R code in here. And I can get help information for this, for example, using Shift K, which would be in your RStudio, or your VS Code would be, I guess, hovering over it or control clicking. But in Quarto, well, we have our markdown code, and then we have our code chunks, which contain our code. And those can be of different languages. We can have R code in here, we can have Python code in here, maybe even Lua code. And the challenge that I wanted to solve when I decided I also want to use Quarto in NeoVim, because I was using it in RStudio before, and then Quarto became sort of slowly came up, and I really liked it. I wanted to use it in NeoVim as well. So I asked the Quarto devs how they do it for the VS Code stuff. And they said, well, you have your document, and then you create sort of hidden documents that only contain the code, and then you sort of translate between the requests. And I implemented that initially as a plugin, and then it turned out to be quite useful for other things as well. So it became its own plugin, and this is where the otters come in. There's too many otter words in here. I ended up writing this plugin called otter.nvim, which is then being used by the Quarto nvim plugin to do all the code stuff. And the main idea is, well, for any code we can inject into a document, we can just extract that and write it to its own document. So a sort of document in memory in NeoVim is called a buffer. we can list all buffers using ls. And right now we only see 2, but if we do ls exclamation mark, it also shows hidden buffers that are not currently shown. And we can see these auto buffers that we create behind the scenes. So let's go, for example, to buffer number 5 for our Python code. And let me split this window so we can see it side by side. Control W, V for vertical split. And now let's go to buffer 5, B5, and go down until we find some code. And the trick here is that the line numbers are just the same. We just write it to the same line numbers, except there's then only the code. And then what otter.env does is when you ask for example, a hover in here, it takes this request, intercepts it, and forwards it to this otter buffer that then sends a response, and then we modify the response as well. Oops. So that the response is also displayed in here instead of in here. And this allows us to do this for any language that we want, which means we can have our code in here, and we get completions for it. So if I type in here, I get my R code completions. If I type in here, I get my code for Python. I can do things like go to definition using GD. I can list my references and jump between those. And I can do the same for example, for Lua code even. And Lua is an interesting case because Lua is not only the language that you use. I already have Quarto. That you use to write Quarto extensions. So Lua overview, yes. Or Quarto filters. It is also the language that you use to write and configure your NeoVim. So my NeoVim configuration is also just a bunch of Lua files. And learning Lua is actually like quite easy. It's a very simple language, but still powerful. So I can always recommend learning Lua. So now we get the same for Lua as well. And this extends anytime. Let me also quickly show you. Anytime we have these injected languages, and we can very easily get those in NeoVim because NeoVim uses a parser system called tree sitter, which then you just write grammars for, and it can parse a syntax tree of your document, and you can then traverse this syntax tree. So in here, I can show you the syntax tree we currently have. And you see, for example, now we are in a expression. Now we are, for example, in a return statement. But we are still inside of a code chunk that has a language string. Same for Python, same for R. And that means if I write just an injection for some other language, I can then use Otter to inject, or I can then use Otter to get language server features for that language. So for example, say I have do I have an R file in here? I have an R file and I have some, let's say I have like a database, a SQL database, and I write some strings like this. And I always call them query strings. I can then write an injection that whenever it finds this string or this variable called query string, it will inject the SQL grammar into this. And then we get syntax highlighting for this, but then we can also activate Otter for this and get, for example, I would get completion here then. Now, I haven't set this up for R or something, but I've seen people using this a lot, for example, in Rust, using connecting to SQL, for example. And of course, the question is also like, how do we execute code in here? I mean, we can run Quarto preview or use my keyboard shortcut for this, which is spacebar QP to preview our code and output. This is just the regular Quarto preview you would get. Or we just make a new terminal in here and then send code from our Quarto buffer to our terminal. Let's do this for Python for now. I have a shortcut that's called leader CI. So leader and C for code and I for insert IPython. But I could do the same for R. And now if I run Control Enter here, I will send this code from the left side to the right side. And then it opens the plot up here and I can move it around. I have it in here. Now if I suddenly need to switch to R, I can also just close this, make an R console, jump a couple of code chunks up, and run this code. It opens on my second monitor, which is why it's really bright now. But I can make it not a tiling window and then move it over here. And we have our R plot. Now, do you have questions so far? Because I know I'm moving very fast because I want to sort of show you how cool and
No,
exciting it can be.
no questions, still absorbing. You sent me off on a little bit of a quest because I'm trying to find the talk that I know I saw Davis Vaughn give about tree splitter. So
Oh, yeah.
just
Tree sitter is.
yeah, or
yeah.
tree sitter, not splitter. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, tree sitter.
That he there is an R package and there are R bindings for it. But
Oh, that is useful. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so that was a little bit of a little side quest I was on, was trying to find more info about.
That's cool, yeah. Because one thing I'm also working on, and I haven't sort of touched it in a while, is right now we're just using the Markdown grammar for tree sitter for Quarto documents. But Quarto has a couple of more features that like regular Markdown common mark doesn't have. So it would be nice to have our own grammar that extends the Markdown grammar. But I haven't quite gotten around to like adding actual stuff to it. Yeah. But it would be nice to have a pandoc Markdown grammar. I mean, it works in here, right? But yeah. So the main appeal of having NeoVim is that you can basically configure it however you want. And also, of course, you get like the true essence of having Vim motions, operators, and all that kind of stuff, and not just a Vim mode that sort of emulates it. And should you want to get started, what I recommend is to start with something that has some basic configuration and explain stuff. Like, for example, there's this Kickstart project, which is like a one line, no, one mostly one file configuration, and it explains everything that is happening during this. But of course, nowadays there are also a bunch of what people call NeoVim distributions, but it's really just a configuration. And those are sometimes quite popular, and it's also an easy way to get started. But then you sort of don't really make it your own, which is a different question, I guess. Okay. I think this is also the demo part done. I mean, I could basically show you stuff for forever. But I think these things get also just more exciting when you try it for yourself, for example.
Yeah. I can see that. It's very cool. So does Zach, do you have any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I thought this was really cool too. Yeah, yeah. Right now, this feels like the kind of thing I want to try for myself.
Yeah. Lua keeps coming up as something that one of these days I'm going to have to learn Lua.
Yeah, and it's super easy to get started.
That is definitely good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for
It's
writing Quarto extensions, it's handy.
exactly. Yeah.
And
I
I
can't
think
like
learning it in NeoVim is actually like one of the easiest ways to do it because you can directly try it out. So let's say I make a new tab
gotcha.
and I added a like test.lua file. And now I put like print hello in here. I have a function that is called source, or it's like it's a command in Vim to just run the current file, where the percent sign stands for the current buffer. And you see down here, it actually prints hello. So I get the output immediately. And I believe I just have a keyboard shortcut like leader XX or something, or spacebar XX to do the same thing. Yeah. And so I can immediately do stuff in my editor. I can even do like Vim stuff in here. For example, so I want to say, let's say I want to like set the color scheme. That is something you would like see immediately. I can run a Vim command in here. I don't have Groovebox enabled, that makes no sense. And if I execute this, it is now a different color scheme. Which doesn't exist. So it's also a nice sandbox to play around with stuff.
It seems like the applications of this are huge. Like they could go beyond just Quarto. Like
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I use it for everything, basically. Except I'm not yet reading my mails in it, and I think Emacs people will probably do that. And the Vim people are not right there yet, I guess. I have
Funny
looked
because
into it, but
that was where I started with I mean to me at least it was just VI back in the day.
yeah.
But way back in college, I did like text editor emails and
Oh,
had to
nice.
choose my text editor. and just ran. Well, actually, at first I was like, oh no, this thing's impossible to use. And then finally learned all the tricks. I was like, oh yeah. And so I did not read, I guess. I wrote my emails in VI.
Yeah. I do also write stuff in here. When I just want to like write something quickly, I open like a new terminal and
Yep.
just open Vim, and then I write in here. Because it's painful if you're used to Vim commands and then you can't use them somewhere.
My it's funny sometimes listening to my spouse on the phone, watching someone else like a junior coder that she's working with, and she's like, oh, just and we'll tell them the series of keystrokes to make because she's
Yes.
a big Vim user. It's like, I just want to see this one line. Can you please get to it? Here's how you can get to it.
Yeah. Just go to line 20. Then go like,
Yeah.
just press colon 20, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like moving around is so fast, so much
Yeah.
faster when you know what you're doing.
Yes. Very cool. And I can't find it in the video, but what it was is I'm pretty sure the Posit talk at PositConf last year. I'm sorry, the Positron talk, because that is why Davis did the tree sitter work. Is
Okay.
well, I mean, probably not just for that, but that was that pushed it. And so Positron has a lot of tree sitter integration, something.
That is very interesting because Positron is still a fork of VS Code, and that used to use their own highlighter and their own parser.
I suspect that their own one might be part of the proprietary side of VS Code. I'm not
No,
sure.
I think
It's
it's
not.
still
Okay.
open.
Well, it could also. I know there was something
But TreeSitter is
GitHub
very, very good.
related.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's in the Positron talk as far, but there was also I pasted a talk about that he gave at Usar last summer.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
also could have been. I don't know. I know it had come up. I think it was in some blogs. It's something that is kind of in the air of there is the R grammar, so and an R package for exploring various tree sitter grammars.
Yeah, it's interesting with all these like new editors coming up and people doing their own editors.
Yeah.
The interesting part to me is like people come up with like new editors, like I don't know what's the new like AI thing, Cursor or something, that then people like hype up because it has like this AI integration, and it's also just a VS Code fork. But if you really want this sort of AI integration, and you are already a NeoVim user, like the ecosystem is so flexible and the community is so active that you basically get the latest whatever integration really quickly because someone will write a plugin for it. Because the barrier to entry for writing a plugin is so low.
Makes sense.
I mean, it will, of course, like for example, Positron will, I guess, be better for R because it's immediately designed for it. But you can get something similar by building parts of it yourself or relying on the community in NeoVim very quickly. And you can do this for anything, which is kind of cool. So you don't need like a special editor for each language or something.
Yeah, I doing more and more JavaScript in addition to R. And so one of these days I'm gonna have to move over. Right now it is like for the most part, I'm still in RStudio for all the R package work. And then I'll just use the terminal in RStudio for all my JavaScript work.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
But before long, I'm definitely going to have to switch over to Positron or maybe NeoVim or who knows. So very cool. All right. Well, I think that's probably about it. So thank you very much again. And like I said, we'll post this up on YouTube, and you might be watching this on YouTube right now if you're hearing me. And we'll meet again next month. And that info is in the channel because I don't have that handy right now. Let's see. Oh, I got it. Okay. We do have someone signed up to talk to us. Oh,
It's
is
Zach, I
this
think.
this? Yeah, it is Zach. For forecasting energy demand using R next month on the 8th. So I won't actually be there for that one, but we will have at least one other person representing DSLC, and we'll see what we have to see. And everyone is always invited to join at dslc.io, and get your practice talking in front of a group and tell us about what you're interested in, passionate about. All right, and I will see everyone on Slack.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Thank you.